So there I
My story didn't begin with the promise of a bright future. It started with the sound of tired sighs and the smell of damp earth, mixed with my father's sweat as he came home exhausted from the fields. For us, life wasn't a journey of great achievements, but a daily struggle against scarcity. I grew up certain that wealth belonged to a distant world, a parallel universe inhabited by people who never had to tighten their belts. This belief took root in me with every visit to my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I remember one Christmas in particular. All my cousins showed off their expensive gifts, the latest bikes, video games, brand name clothes. I sat in a corner, simply observing. My only company was a pair of old shoes I tried to hide under a chair. My relatives' looks were a mixture of pity and superiority. They didn't need to say a word to make me feel small. Their gestures, the way they served the most expensive wine, the way they talked about their vacations, everything screamed our differences. I learned at a very young age that Proverbs 15, verse 1 says that a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. My response to their humiliation wasn't a response, but dignity. It was at that moment that the seed of change was planted in me. I swore to myself that I would do whatever it took to ensure that the next generation of our family would never feel the shame I had felt. My father, on his deathbed, left me the only inheritance he had, an old, battered wooden box with worn edges and a scratched surface. Inside, there was no gold, no money, no jewelry. There was only one thing, an object that to others was nothing more than scrap metal. But to me, it was the most precious memory I had of him. The wooden box held a secret my father had kept his whole life, and now it was in my hands. The object inside was an ancient pocket watch. Not just any watch. It was the one he had used for years. The one he said helped him keep track of his working hours. My aunts and uncles, when they found out, laughed. "A pocket watch? What are you going to do with a pocket watch?" But for me, that watch was the symbol of honest work and perseverance. And I knew it held a story much bigger than anyone could imagine. I knew that to change my story, I would have to do something drastic, something no one in my family would understand. The only valuable thing I had wasn't a car or a piece of jewelry. It was the promise I made to him. To fulfill that promise, I would have to part with everything. I was ready for it. After my father passed, the grief consumed me in a way I never imagined. It was a silent pain, mixing with uncertainty for the future and the echoes of my relatives' laughter. The funeral was a quick, almost emotionless event, as if we were burying not just a man, but a life of unfulfilled dreams. My mother, with the same dignity that had been with her all her life, simply looked at me and whispered, "He left you something." I knew exactly what it was. That object, which everyone else saw as scrap, was the only inheritance that mattered to me. My uncle drove in silence. He was the most successful of my father's siblings. He had land, cattle, and a house that looked like a palace. I could smell the scent of success embedded in his car's leather seats. He finally broke the silence. "Look, don't get your hopes up. Your father had nothing. Don't expect much from the will." His words were like daggers, and a shiver ran down my spine. I knew he was right, but the cruelty in his words hit me hard. The lawyer, a serious-looking middle-aged man, opened an envelope and began to read the will. Every word was a revelation. My father had left the land to my uncle, the house to my aunt, and the cattle to my cousins. I heard sighs of relief and whispers of joy, while I felt myself shrinking. Finally, the lawyer paused and looked at me. And for his daughter, he left only one thing: a wooden box with an old pocket watch inside. The laughter started, low at first, but soon grew into a full-blown roar. My uncle laughed, my aunts laughed, my cousins laughed. They looked at me with the same mix of pity and superiority I knew so well. But this time, there was a touch of triumph in their eyes. A wooden box and a watch? What are you going to do with that, girl? Open an antique shop? My uncle mocked. Your father was always a dreamer, but in the end, he left nothing of real value. I stood up and held the box tightly. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to give them the pleasure of seeing me break down. I looked at them, one by one, and felt a fire of determination grow in my chest. That watch was all I had left, and I knew, with all the certainty in the world, that it was worth more than all their land, all their cattle, and all their houses. I left the office, and when I got to the car, my uncle looked at me with a scornful smile. You got the inheritance, but what are you really going to do with it? He asked. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, and in that moment I knew my journey had only just begun. I was going to prove that my father's inheritance wasn't just a piece of junk, but the key to my freedom. I remember every detail of that day, the way the laughter echoed in the lawyer's office, the smell of incense in my uncle's car, the way my family treated me as if I were a piece of trash. But of all the memories, the one that haunted me the most was the look in my father's eyes on his deathbed. He looked at me with a serenity I had never seen before. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He just pointed to the wooden box and gave me a weak smile, full of love. My daughter, if you are reading this, know that my greatest treasure is not a farm nor cattle. It is your courage. This pocket watch may not have value for our family, but it holds a secret. The history of our family is engraved on this object. If you are brave enough to discover the truth, you will find your own inheritance. I knew my father's note wasn't a metaphor. He was a practical man, a man of direct words. The secret he mentioned wasn't philosophical. It was something real, something I could find. I started researching the watch. I used the city library, searching for books on history, art, and watchmaking. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. I was about to give up, but then I remembered a lesson my father had taught me, found in Matthew 7:7. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. This faith gave me the strength to keep searching. I read everything I could, but found nothing. I was about to give up hope, but then I remembered my father's words. It helped me not to lose track of my working hours. The working hours, the time, the history. I was in an unfamiliar city, spending the little money I had on hotels and books. I was about to give up, but then I came across a photo of a pocket watch identical to mine. The description said, 18th century pocket watch, made in Switzerland, used by watchmakers who worked for royalty. Each watch was unique, with a secret mark that identified its creator. The secret mark. The secret. I looked at my watch, and with trembling hands, I searched for the mark. It was there, a small fleur-de-lis engraved on the back of the watch, the mark of royalty. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The watch I thought was scrap was in fact a historical artifact, and it belonged to me. The discovery of the secret mark on my father's watch was like a bolt out of the blue. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to fit. My father's words about our family's history being engraved on the object took on a tangible meaning. That old piece of metal was not just a memory, but a link to a past I never imagined. The fleur-de-lis, a symbol of French royalty, discreetly engraved on the back, spoke of a lineage, a history much grander than the humble life we had always known. I spent days in that library, immersed in books about the history of Swiss watchmaking and the families dedicated to this art throughout the centuries. With each page turned, with each detailed illustration of complex mechanisms, my excitement grew. I found references to watchmakers who worked on commission for the nobility, whose creations were considered true works of art, often adorned with secret marks to identify their authorship and ensure their exclusivity. It was then that the name Auguste Dubois appeared in an old manuscript, accompanied by a description of his mark, a stylized fleur-de-lis. The same symbol engraved on my father's watch. The history of our family is engraved on this object. That phrase echoed in my mind with renewed force. Auguste Dubois, a royal watchmaker. How did that watch, belonging to such a renowned artisan, end up in the hands of my father, a simple man from the countryside? The distance between the opulence of the court and the humility of our life seemed insurmountable. However, the possession of that object was undeniable proof of a connection, however tenuous. I decided to go back home to look for more clues in my family's past. I went through old photo albums, looking for familiar faces, for similarities that could give me some indication of this unexpected connection. I found old letters, written in elegant calligraphy, addressed to my great-grandfather. The sender's last name was Dubois. My heart raced. The letters spoke of business, of money transfers, and of a legacy to be taken care of. And in one of the letters, a phrase caught my attention. Time, like this watch, holds secrets that only the true heirs can decipher. At that moment, I realized that my quest was not just for material value, but for an understanding of my own history, of my roots. The watch was not just an old object. It was the key to unraveling a past that had been carefully hidden, and I was determined to discover the truth, no matter how surprising it might be. That was my true legacy. I knew I needed professional help. What I held in my hands was more than a family heirloom. It was evidence of a hidden past. Telling my story to the renowned historian, Dr. Julian Miller, a specialist in European heraldry and genealogy, was like solving a mystery. He listened carefully, his eyes gleaming with interest when I mentioned the name Auguste Dubois and the fleur-de-lis. The fleur-de-lis is a symbol of French royalty, one of the oldest. Auguste Dubois, On the other hand, is a name that resonates in watchmaking circles. His creations were legendary and worth small fortunes. But the story doesn't fit. How did an item like this end up in your family? He asked, his voice full of curiosity. He explained to me that the Dubois family, fleeing persecution during the French Revolution, had migrated to Switzerland, but a small branch, still linked to royalty, had ventured beyond the Alps towards Eastern Europe. They were masters at camouflaging their fortunes in seemingly common objects, as it was the only way to escape without being robbed. My father's watch fit perfectly into this story, with its secret mark and superior quality. Doctor. Niller told me that if the watch were authentic, its value would be immeasurable, not only monetarily, but historically. I called my childhood friend, Maria, who was a lawyer. She was the only person I trusted. I told her everything about the watch's story, the secret mark, my father's note. She was shocked, but her professional mind quickly kicked into gear. We need an expert report, a forensic evaluation. If what you're saying is true, this is your game changer, my friend, she said. They laughed at you because of a worthless object, but your story is going to be the most valuable of all. I decided that the best way to prove the watch's value was to auction it. Nuria helped me find a renowned international auctioneer who was fascinated by the object's history and authenticity. The auction room was packed with collectors, historians, and curious onlookers. The auctioneer, with his imposing voice, presented the watch, telling its fascinating story, its connection to the nobility, and its rarity. My heart was in my throat. I was about to risk everything. I was about to show my family that my father's inheritance was not a piece of junk, but the key to my freedom. The auctioneer gave the first bid, and the watch was sold for a value that would make my family regret every laugh they had given me. I was there, with sweaty palms, looking at my father's pocket watch, which was now on a velvet pedestal. The auctioneer began the description with a dramatic voice. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item to be auctioned is not just a watch. It is a piece of history, a relic of the French Revolution, created by the master watchmaker Auguste Dubois. This rare and valuable item is proof of a lineage of nobles who fled persecution and rebuilt their lives based on honest work and perseverance. The bids began to climb. The price, which I expected to be a few $1,000s, soared to tens of thousands and then to hundreds. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was looking at the object my family had called scrap, but which was now being sold for a fortune. With each bid, I remembered every laugh, every look of pity, every word of humiliation. That watch was no longer just my father's inheritance, but also my revenge, my answer to everyone who had doubted me. The auctioneer looked at the man on the phone, and the price went up to $1 million. The room fell silent, and the auctioneer prepared to hit the gavel. But then, a new voice echoed, $2 million. The voice belonged to an elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair. She looked at the auctioneer and smiled, with the expression of someone who was not going to give up. The battle began. The bid was 2 million, and the man on the phone offered 2.5 million. The woman offered 3 million. The auctioneer seemed shocked, and the crowd was excited, with the tension in the air palpable. The watch was sold for $5 million. The room erupted in applause, and the woman in the wheelchair looked at me and smiled, her eyes full of admiration. She was a renowned historian who knew the value of that object. I got up and left the room, my heart pounding. At that moment, a truth my father had always told me, reading Psalm 37:25, came to mind. I have been young and now am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their children begging bread. My father was a righteous man, and his inheritance was not a curse, but a blessing. I was no longer the girl my family had humiliated. I was the woman who sold a piece of junk for $5 million. My father was right. The watch was my inheritance, the key to my freedom. And now I had the power to change my life and my family's forever. The world seemed brighter. The sound of my family's laughter no longer haunted me. With every sip of coffee, I tasted the flavor of freedom. The watch, that small piece of metal they called scrap, had given me what I needed most: the opportunity to start over. With $5 million in my account, I was no longer the poor and humiliated girl, but a woman with power, with a voice, and above all, with dignity. My revenge wouldn't be with words, but with my success. I decided that the first thing I would do was to restore my father's wooden box. That object, which to everyone else was just scrap, was to me the only inheritance that mattered. The restorer, a man with the same gleam in his eyes as my father, told me that the box was made of oak wood, a rare and valuable wood. He told me that the box was proof that my father, despite all the difficulties, never gave up on dreaming. He told me that the box was proof that a father's love for his daughter is the greatest treasure in the world. And he told me that the box was proof that our history was not just one of poverty, but of perseverance and love. I went back home, but not to show off. I went back to fulfill the promise I made to my father. I decided that my revenge would not be with words. But with my success, I wouldn't humiliate them. I would give them the greatest lesson of their lives. I would show them that true wealth is not in a fancy car, in a big house, or in a jewel. True wealth is in perseverance, in honest work, and in love. And true revenge is your happiness. The country house, which I bought for my mother, was my way of telling her that I was there for her. That place was our refuge, our place of peace. My mother looked at me and said, "Your father always said that one day you would be a successful woman." He was right. I am so proud of you. And in that moment, I knew that my journey had not been in vain. I was no longer the girl my family had humiliated. I was the woman who changed her life forever. I knew this day would come. I hadn't made a fuss about my new life, but news travels fast, especially in our small town. The house I bought for my mother was an open secret, a sign that something big had happened. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I got up and went to open the door. Outside, there they all were, my uncle, my aunts, and my cousins, the same family that had humiliated me, that had laughed at me in the lawyer's office. But their looks were different now. There was no more pity or mockery. There was shock, surprise, and above all, interest. "So, you bought this house?" my uncle asked, his voice failing. I just smiled. "It's a beautiful place, isn't it?" My aunt, the one who despised me the most, touched one of the pieces of furniture with trembling hands. It's beautiful, but how? How did you manage it?" I poured myself a coffee and looked at them one by one. They were the same, but the circumstances had changed. They were no longer the rulers of the world. They were the curious ones, the ones who wanted to know my story. They were in my territory, in my house. My uncle, the most greedy of them all, approached me with the expression of someone about to ask for a favor. I heard about the watch. I'm sorry. I didn't know its value. I was a fool. He tried to say. I cut him off. "Don't worry, Uncle. The watch was only a small part of my inheritance." My father left me the real inheritance before he died. He left me the courage not to give up, not to let myself be defined by the laughter of others. He left me the perseverance to keep going, even when everything seemed lost. I looked at my family one by one. I no longer felt anger or hate, only pity. I was no longer the humiliated girl. I was the woman who rose from the ashes, and I knew that my story was not just about the watch or the money. My story was about my father's love, my courage, and my perseverance. And at that moment, I knew that my life would be my revenge. My story is not about vengeance, but about truth. The truth that my father was not a failure, but a man who gave me the greatest inheritance in the world, the courage not to give up. The truth that money and wealth are not the most important things in life, but rather love, perseverance, and dignity. I looked at my uncle and my aunts and gave them a hug. "I forgive you," I said, "not for me, but for him." I looked at my father in the photograph and felt a lump in my throat. He would be proud of me. He would be proud to know that his story was not in vain. He would be proud to know that his inheritance, that watch, gave me the chance to change my life forever. My journey was not in vain. I am no longer the girl my family humiliated. I am the woman who changed her life forever. I understood what my father had always wanted to teach me from 1 Peter 3:9. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling. Instead, bless, for to this you were called, that you may inherit a blessing. My revenge was not their humiliation, but my peace. And in that moment, I knew my life would be my greatest blessing. And my story is proof that true wealth is not in an expensive car, in a big house, or in a jewel. True wealth is in perseverance, in honest work, and in love. And true revenge is your happiness.
It was magical.